Madam President, I rise today to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the final report of the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, also known as the 9/11 Commission Report. As the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, a committee on which I proudly serve with the presiding officer, I can tell you that this report has been and continues to be incredibly important to the work that we do in the committee that Dr. Carper and I are privileged to lead in this Congress. Nearly 13 years ago, as we'll recall, our nation suffered the most devastating attack on our soil since Pearl Harbor. Almost every American alive today will remember where they were on the day that the Twin Towers collapsed, when the Pentagon was hit, and when they saw the wreckage in the fields of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We asked ourselves at that time, why would anybody want to do this? How did this happen? What could have been done to prevent this tragedy? In the months after this horrific attack, Congress and the President endeavored to answer these questions. Together, they established something that we call the 9/11 Commission. Led by former New Jersey Governor Tom Kean, our neighbor across the Delaware River, a Republican, and by former Indiana Congressman Lee Hamilton, a Democrat, one of my mentors in the House of Representatives. The commission was charged with preparing a full and complete account of the circumstances surrounding these horrific attacks and recommending ways to make our nation more secure. This proved to be no small task. The commission interviewed more than 1,200 people in 10 countries, including every single relevant senior national security official from not one but two administrations, and reviewed more than 2.5 million pages of documents. Despite the political tensions and partisan climate that had engulfed our nation at the time, the commission put aside their own political differences and issued their final reports 10 years ago today. The 592-page report contained a full accounting of what had happened before and after the attacks, and included no less than 41 recommendations on how we could prevent another tragedy like the one that was visited upon us on September 11th. The report went on to sell more than 1 million copies, and it was at the top of the national bestseller list, numerous national bestseller lists. Imagine that, a report, a federal report, bestseller. It was a remarkable achievement, not only because of the depth and breadth of the Commission's findings, but because all 10 commissioners, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, came to agreement on every single word of this report. Around here, some days we can't agree if it's Wednesday, much less agree on every single word of a 592-page report. In the months and years following the report's release, Democrats and Republicans in Congress worked together with the Bush administration to enact not one but 2 major laws to implement the report's recommendations. These laws were championed in part by our good friends Joe Lieberman and Susan Collins. Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, Susan Collins of Maine, both of whom served as chair and as ranking members of the committee I now chair. Among other things, these 2 historic bills created a new Director of National Intelligence to coordinate and oversee all information sharing and intelligence activities. These laws implemented a passenger pre-screening system that has helped to ensure that terrorists aren't able to fly on aircraft, while also establishing a fully staffed privacy and civil liberties oversight board. When you think about all of these accomplishments and more, I think it's safe to say that the 9/11 Commission report has proven to be one of the most important and influential efforts of its kind in recent history. We owe, as a nation, a real debt of gratitude to the commissioners for their determined and clear-eyed approach to improving the security of our nation. Well, we might ask ourselves, well, how did they do this? Well, the committee's leadership, Governor Kean and Congressman Hamilton, wrote in their own words on the 9/11 anniversary of the September 11th attacks about why the commission was so special and so effective. Here's what they had to say, and I quote, "First, because of the great damage and trauma the 9/11 attacks produced, the American public demanded action and had high expectations for measures and reforms they would improve our nation's security. Importantly, they went on to say, importantly, the statutory mandate for the commission was limited, it was precise, it was clear. The commission was authorized to investigate the facts and the circumstances surrounding the attacks and to make recommendations to keep our country safe. The commission had an extraordinary nonpartisan staff. They really did have an excellent staff, the members of which possessed deep expertise and conducted their work with thoroughness and professionalism. The commissioner, many of whom I'm privileged to know, had deep experience in government and political credibility with different constituencies. The final report, and this is continuing their words, but the final report was unanimous and bipartisan. Families of the victims of 9/11 provided solid and sophisticated support throughout the life of the commission and in the years since. And following the commission, the commissioners and staff continued to work closely with Congress and the executive branch to implement and monitor reform. That's what they had to say. In other words, they had the will to act. They had the authority and responsibility to act. They had the support of great staff and the Americans most directly affected by the tragedy. That's the families that were affected. And they had extraordinary leadership from Governor Keane and Congressman Hamilton, both of whom put aside partisan differences and built a trusting relationship for the betterment of our nation. I once asked them, we're having a hearing and they're in Dirksen 342, where our committee meets now. And they were testifying before us, the chair and the vice chair, Governor Keane and Congressman Hamilton. And I asked him, I said, you know, in a day and age when it's hard for us to agree on much of anything around here, how were you able to agree, the two of you and your commission, on the entire almost 600 pages of this report? And here's, I'll never forget what they both said. They said, well, we didn't really know each other, but we were thrust into this, asked to serve in this capacity. And we got to know each other. And they said we got to know each other really well. And out of all the time that we spent together, grew a trust that was almost without bounds, and a very strong friendship, a real bond. And sometimes we think about why we're so dysfunctional here. That's, in my judgment, is really a big part of what's missing. The lack of trust and understanding one another, having that kind of personal friendship that goes across all kinds of bounds. Well, after 10 years, I still marvel at the trust developed between the commissioners, and especially the chairman and the vice chairman. Perhaps most importantly, no other large-scale 9/11 type attack on U.S. soil has occurred over these past 13 years. The improvements made our intelligence, made our law enforcement, made our security agencies. As a result of 9/11 work, commissioners' work have undoubtedly contributed to that good fortune. The response to the Boston Marathon bombing on April 15th, 2013, just last year, was a shining example of how the investments that we've made as a nation in training and equipping for our first responders have made us more capable, more resilient, and more secure than ever. But that attack itself showed us that we cannot grow complacent. We must maintain a resolve and maintain our commitment to the security of our nation. The Boston bombings, new threats to aviation, foreign fighters in Syria coming home, these are all stark reminders that we continue to face persistent and evolving terrorist threats. Of course, one of the biggest threats our country faces is in cyberspace. And that's why Dr. Coburn, our staffs, the members of our committee, and I have worked so hard to move 3 bipartisan cyber bills out of our committee this year, and they now await action by the full Senate in this chamber. These are just a few of the challenges that our nation continues to face. We know that there's still work to be done to fully implement some of the Commission's recommendations. So today, as we commemorate the release of this report, I think we'd be wise to revisit and attempt to recapture the spirit of unity that made this bipartisan achievement possible by the 9/11 Commission. And as we seek to confront and to overcome the challenges before us on this day, we'd be wise to consider again the example set by Governor Kane, Congressman Lee Hamilton, and the other 8 commissioners, and we should be inspired by their example. The people we are privileged to represent across the nation are pleading with us to set aside what separates us, pleading with us, remembering what binds us together, and just do the hard work that we need to do to keep our homeland secure in an ever more turbulent world. Let me just close today by thanking once again the 9/11 commissioners, not only for their important work that they did all those years ago, but for the enduring example that they set for us a decade ago. Let's be inspired by them. Our country and its people are counting on us on so many different fronts. Let's not let them down.